What is life like on the other side of the wall? We're going to travel into the West Bank. I'm going to show you footage. I've got about 17 minutes of footage to show you where I'm going to expose to you life behind the wall for Palestinians under Israeli occupation. So you're just going to see this with your own eyes for your own selves. And I'm also going to take you towards the end of the footage. You're going to see what life is like on the Israeli side of the wall. And in particular, I'm going to take you to one of the poorest, most crime riddled areas inside of Israel. So you can see even how the poorest of poor inside of Israel live. It's a city called Lod. It's a very heavily Arab city. So they've got about 30% Arab population there. They also have a lot of other mixes of Israelis in there, but it's extremely poor, so that you can kind of do a contrast and compare. Then I'll also take you into the old city of Tel Aviv. So not into the shiny new Tel Aviv. I didn't actually go into that area. So I'm going to start showing you some of the footage. So let's go ahead and get started. This is life on the other side of the wall in the West Bank. So there you see one of the military checkpoints. Here's the wall. This big wall. So the wall is actually 450 miles long, and it encompasses, it pretty much surrounds the West Bank completely. You see the checkpoint, you see the towers where the Israelis guard the wall. Here's another checkpoint for you. You can see that checkpoint. Those checkpoints are everywhere. There's like 100 checkpoints. And some checkpoints, they close them down randomly. They'll kind of be pop-up checkpoints. The very first one you saw was more of a pop-up checkpoint. Sometimes those are down, sometimes those are up. The Palestinians never really know if they're going to be stopped. But look at this wall. It's really some way to live. They're seeing this wall. It surrounds them, completely surrounds them. Now, some areas where they're trying to guard the settlements, it's not a wall, but it's this fencing, this electronic fencing. And you could see those white posts that kind of stick up every so often. See those white posts? Those are the electronic sensors. And those, once anybody crosses through those vehicles, people, then the Israelis are alerted, and then they come running out to guard the settlements. Here's one of the settlements. There's many, many settlements littered all throughout the West Bank. They range from looking like neighborhoods to looking like full-on cities. And they range inside. Here's one that looks more like a neighborhood. You can see that there. The other ones looked more like cities. And they're all over the West Bank. And they're completely surrounded by that fencing, electronic fencing. They have Israelis guarding them, and they're everywhere. Now here's a look inside, going into one of the cities in the West Bank. I believe this is Ramallah. And we're just driving through. A little bit of background noise. We were on a bus, there was about 10 of us. And so I muffled it down a little bit. So the conversation, we're just chit-chatting about things, or we're talking about our day, what we're going to go see, or where we're going to go eat, those types of conversations. So I figured you didn't need to listen to us chit-chat about, how we slept. More looks inside the city. They have some really nice cafes and restaurants. So that's the call of prayer. You hear that call of prayer going on multiple times a day throughout every city and village in the West Bank. So they have amazing food in the West Bank, delicious food. And they feed you. The Palestinians, oh my gosh, when you sit down to eat with them, they will feed you and feed you and feed you and feed you. They're very hospitable people, very lovely people. They love to see you, and they give you coffee and cookies and tons of food. Oh, too much food. So this is a pretty common, it's what it really, you can see it's very poor. Here's some nightlife, kind of what it looks like at night. Now, there are bars on the West Bank. You can certainly go and get a drink. You can go to a hookah lounge. There's not a lot of bars. The Muslim population doesn't drink a whole lot, but you definitely can go and get yourself some drinks. Here's some of the bars. There's the city hall with a nice fountain. There's a bar and restaurant down there. There's a bar. And that's the hotel we stayed in, the Royal Court Hotel. It's really nice. And here's inside Vintage inside of Royal Court Hotel, which is a really nice lounge and coffee shop. So they have some really nice stuff. So City Hall puts this on at night. So they do have some nice aspects to life there, but for the most part, they're very poor. As you can see here, there's a lot of junk and trash. Now, the Israelis, I believe, are in charge of the trash collection, but they don't do it often because they cite security reasons. So the Palestinians live amongst a lot of trash and amongst a lot of rubble. They need to get permits in order to fix their infrastructure or build anything, and it's very difficult to get permits because the Israelis consider everything a security threat, so they're not really likely to give you some concrete and bulldozers. So it looks really poor. You see these water tanks that are all on top of the buildings. They're not given running water. They don't have the infrastructure for running water. You'll see some of the tanks. And so they have to store the water. You can see those black tanks on top of the buildings. They have to store the water in those tanks so that, the days that they don't get their running water, they still have water. But it's very low pressure. They have to be very conservative with the water. Now, a lot of these buildings, they're not finished. This one here is an unfinished building. And a lot of it has to do with, getting financing for the buildings or getting the materials to finish the building, that sort of thing. Here is one that the Israelis actually bulldozed the top of that building right there because the owner who built didn't have a permit to build. They have to get permits, and they built it anyway without being able to get the permit. And so the Israelis came and busted it down. It's considered a security threat. See, they were trying to build up and see where that wall is. So a lot of times the Israelis won't give them a security clearance to build because if they build up and it's too close to the wall, they consider it a security threat. So they come and they tear it down. Or they'll come and they'll take the land, take the building, citing security reasons. And, sometimes they might have legitimate security reasons, and many times they don't. They're just taking someone's land, someone's house who's trying to just build a house because their family's expanding, that sort of thing. But you can see it's very poor. The trash is everywhere. The rubble is everywhere. The demolitions are everywhere. This is what it looks like over there. Now, they do, like I showed you, have some nice areas, and, they try to find some joy and pleasure in life, but for the most part, this is what it looks like. You see a lot of unfinished buildings. See those water tanks on that building over there in the distance. Even the hotels, even the nice hotels, still have to have water tanks on top of the buildings. And lately, they've been actually shutting down the electricity, cycling through it. So they'll shut down the electricity for a few hours a day. I know they do that in Gaza. Gaza's really bad. The West Bank is not nearly as bad as Gaza, but can't get into Gaza. I would love to go, but can't get in. So this is a refugee camp. So this is a really poor, a poor area of the West Bank. The refugees are families that were expelled during the wars. They lost their homes, they lost their land, and so they originally camped out in tents in these locations. And then charities and organizations came along and helped them build up kind of villages, I guess, or, encampments, but they're really poor. These people have no opportunity, no jobs, no industry. They've really, really struggled to get out of really the slums, essentially. So they were expelled from their homes. They essentially had to come and live in a slum, and lacking opportunities, lacking jobs, lacking economy. It's really tough to dig yourself out of that. So these are little children going home from school. So the refugee encampments are pretty run down. They're definitely the poorest of the poor in the West Bank. And the children, we met a lot of these children. They're just lovely kids. And there's a big misnomer that children are taught to hate the Israelis, and that is not true. I did not meet very many, of course there are some, but I didn't meet very many Palestinians who hate Israelis or hate Jews or anything like that. They don't feel that way at all. Of course, there are some that feel that way, just like, there's extremists on both sides of this conflict for sure. But for the most part, the Palestinians were very lovely people. They reminded me a lot of Italians, to be quite honest with you. I spent quite a bit of time in Italy, and I was actually struck by how similar in culture, attitude, hospitality, warmth, even religion. The Italians are very Catholic and the Palestinians are very Muslim, although there were a lot, and there are a lot of Christian Palestinians, tons of them. But very much like Italians in a lot of ways. So it was just really heartbreaking. Oh, okay, so now we're on the Israeli side of the wall. Now you can see there's the wall. The Israeli side is decorated. It looks, they've decorated it in stone. It looks like a U.S. freeway. This does not look like you're in a prison like the other side of that wall looks. So on their side, it's really nice. So we're going into the Israeli side. And now I'm going to show you a really poor area of Israel on the Israeli side of the wall. So this is considered one of the most crime-riddled, poorest areas of Israel. So you could imagine what the nice areas look like. So I'm going to show you, just to be fair, I'm going to show you what the bad side of the Israeli side of the wall looks like, so you can contrast and compare even the difference in what would be considered the ghetto on the Israeli side versus the West Bank side of the wall. People living in the West Bank, you can see the difference. I mean, look at this roundabout here. There's no trash. It looks really nice. See, there's a lack of trash. Look at this. There's fruit stands. Everything looks a lot nicer, even in the slums of Israel. Things are nicer here. So now inside of Lod, which is where this is, they still do have quite a bit of segregation between the Arabs and the non-Arab Israelis. So right here is kind of a non-Arab. Well, this is more of like the industry side. Anyone can go anywhere, but the when you go into the neighborhoods where the houses are, the Arab neighborhoods are even poorer than, so they're the poorest of the poor on the Israeli side of the wall. And they still have, really rundown homes and a lot of trash that doesn't really get collected very often. But on the Israeli side of the wall, at least the Palestinians living there have the same human rights as the Israelis. They just don't have, because they are also Israelis, but they just don't have the same community rights or rights as a people. But they, on an individual level, have the same human rights that on the West Bank side of the wall they don't have, because the West Bank side of the wall is under military occupation and under military law. The Israelis living on the Israeli side of the wall, whether they be Arab or not, are living under a regular type of law. So there's Tel Aviv. You can see this is Old Town Jaffa. This is kind of Old Town Tel Aviv, which is a really, this is old, but look at how nice it is still in comparison to the West Bank side. Shopping, dining, cafes. Again, I didn't go into the shiny new side of Tel Aviv where they have all the nightlife and the clubs and all the stuff that's really modern. I didn't go into there, so I don't know. But just being on the old side of town looks really nice comparatively to the West Bank, so I could only imagine. They have nice lush parks, lots of trees, spaces for people to hang out. You don't see this in the West Bank. They don't have this in the West Bank. So then here we are back on the West Bank side of the wall. So, I'm going to let you make up your own mind on this. I'm just trying to show you what each side of the wall looks like. I don't think you need to hear a story. A lot of people say, well, you're only getting one side of the story. You're only getting one side of the story. You're not hearing the other side. And when it comes to just the visuals of how one side is living on one side of the wall and how the other side is living, I don't think you need to hear a story. I don't need to tell you a story. I think you just need to see it with your own eyes, which is what I'm hoping this footage shows you. And many Israelis are completely unaware of how people on the West Bank, how they're being forced to live. They don't ever go there. They don't ever see it. They're completely unaware. They're completely oblivious to the ways that the Palestinians on the West Bank side of the wall are forced to live. I think maybe they have an envisionment of their mind that it's similar to the Arab neighborhoods inside of Israel on the Israeli side of the wall. Perhaps they have that envisionment in their mind, but the truth is that it is very, very different. On the West Bank side of the wall, we only had 3G internet, 3G on our phones. And they just barely got 3G. They were just barely allowed to have that. It's considered a security threat for them, apparently, to have faster internet and better cell phone service. Same thing, the water situation was very odd. We knew which days of the week the water wasn't running. You could kind of tell based on the water pressure when you take a shower or when you wash your hands. And you have to be very conservative with water on the West Bank side of the wall because you don't know how much water they have left in those tanks. So life is made just very complicated and difficult. Of course, when they then start shutting down the electricity, that means your Wi-Fi goes down, your lights are out. And what I had been hearing from people that were in the West Bank was that the Israelis had started, or maybe I think it actually might be the Palestinian Authority that was that they weren't able to pay their bills. It's really complex on who is responsible for the issues regarding the water situation and the electricity situation. The Israelis will say it's not our fault, it's their fault because they're the ones in charge or they don't pay their bills. And so then now they're having to cycle through water or they're having to cycle through electricity. However, the Israelis are in charge of the permits to build the infrastructure. They're in charge of the permits to, so they're in charge of the red tape and that those sorts of things, which I'm going to get into greater detail on that in a future episode. But just wanting to show you right now what it looks like on each side of the wall. Hopefully this is a bit eye-opening. I've got more footage coming your way. There's more segments coming your way. We're going to get into specifically Hebron, the city of Hebron, and the Al Shahuda Street, which is a street that Palestinians they're no longer allowed to go down that street. It's completely blocked off. Israeli settlers live there, and the Palestinian homes have been deadbolted and sealed shut, and their windows have been encased with cages to make sure that they don't access this street. It's the creepiest place I've ever been in my life. I can't even explain how creepy it is, but that is what I'm going to be doing next. So please stick around. Please make sure to subscribe, hit the bell to watch this series. This is me just kind of showing you what life is like under occupation for Palestinians in the West Bank. Luckily, today, Netanyahu announced that he's not going to be annexing the Jordan Valley inside the West Bank, but that maybe he'll do it next week. So just giving you a little bit of insight more into this conflict. And so please, again, subscribe and hit the bell. Thank you so much for watching.